Welcome everyone to the Green Talent Forum here at Localized. We're so excited to have you join us. The Green Talent Forum is a program to give you insights and information on opportunities, career insights, and the future of renewables. The Green Talent Forum is brought to you by Localized in partnership with the Posterity Institute and Planet 2049. And we are very, very happy to thank our sponsors, Majid Al-Fatam. Here today with us, we have the incredible Stephanie Benedetto and Kresse Wesling, moderated by today, Rayouf Al-Hamdi. Rayouf, I'll just start with a brief introduction about you in case people don't know, but I know that you were actually a Forbes 30 under 30. You were named as the Time's Most Influential Teens, and for context, the inventor of the headscarf emoji. So we're very excited to have you here moderating, and I'll let you take it away with an introduction. Go for it, ladies.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Selma, for the wonderful introduction. Like mentioned, I'm Rayouf, a Stanford product design student who's so excited for today's conversation, which is a huge passion area of mine. And I'm honored to be in conversation with Stephanie Benedetto, a former corporate attorney turned climate fintech entrepreneur and the founder of Queen of Raw, an online marketplace that allows brands to sell their fabric that may have been discarded or incinerated to other brands that may find need in that fabric. So super excited to have you here, Stephanie. And then Kresse Wesling, I'm super excited to also be in conversation. Kresse is an environmental entrepreneur behind the brand Elvis Kresse, which turns disposed fire hoses into lifestyle items from bags and belts and so many other items. So thank you, ladies, for the time. I know we're all in different times, and so very excited to be here together. And to start off, simple question to you, Stephanie. What inspired you to start Queen of Raw, and what has been the key milestones in your journey so far?
Funny enough, thank you so much for having us. Excited to be here with everybody. I actually come from a family of over 100 years in fashion and textiles. So I very much grew up around this industry, hearing the stories of the old school ways of doing business. In 1896, my great-grandfather actually came over on a ship from Austria. He landed at Ellis Island and he settled into the Lower East Side of New York. And he was an immigrant chasing the American dream, and he didn't have a penny to his name, and he had to make a living for his family. And what did he do? He actually would find materials and supplies nearby, old fabrics and old furs that immigrants had brought over on the ships with them, but they weren't using anymore. And he would repurpose them by hand with minimal waste and minimal toxins. And he sold these beautiful fashion garments to local customers. And it was an incredibly profitable, successful business. Many of his coats and boleros I still wear 100 plus years later. And he didn't talk about it as sustainability, but at the end of the day, that's very much what it was. It was a solution that truly made sense for people, for planet, and also for his profit. And so I say that because I've used that story and hearing the way he did business truly as an inspiration for how we at Queen of Raw think about the future of the world and sustainable fashion, of course, and how can we use technology to get back to the way my great-grandfather did business. And that's really been kind of our guiding light in how we orient a lot of the business decisions we make. And looking at how can we leverage technology in order to find materials that are readily available near you, excess fabrics, excess finished goods, repurpose them, and bring them back to life in a new way. And it's been exciting to see why now more than ever has been a time really to be able to take advantage of that. It's the best time ever to be looking at how to solve these kinds of problems.
For sure. That's super inspiring. I think just like hearing your lineage in circular fashion as well is super interesting, especially in a time when no one defined it as circular fashion.
Definitely not.
Definitely not. Super cool. Thank you. And then Kresse, towards you, I'd love to hear your origin story for Elvis Kresse and its approach to circular fashion.
Sure. Well, I moved to the UK in 2004, and it was the first time in my life that I had any time. to just do what I wanted to do, or what I was curious, explore what I was curious about. And I went to, first day in the UK, I went to the sewers of London, these old Victorian sewers. And I remember thinking I was going to be so impressed by them, but actually they're just these tunnels that move crap around. So they're beautiful, and they were useful at solving a transport problem, but they actually didn't solve the sewage crisis. And then I thought, well, let me go and look at a waste transfer station, and then a materials recovery facility. And then I went to the British Library because there was no national statistics data on waste that was readily available, let's say, on an iPhone, because there was no iPhones. So I spent a lot of time at the British Library researching the waste situation in the UK, and it was so dire. I mean, the worst recycling rates in Europe, 100 million tons to landfill in that year, that I thought, well, why don't I pick a problem? I'll pick one thing and I'll solve that problem. And then that will give me the license to choose more materials and solve more problems. And I've spent ages, months, going to landfill sites, just writing down lists of materials that I was intrigued by, or that I thought I could fix. And then one day I found a fire hose, and that was it. Completely, totally hooked in. Wow. To the history of the material. It's a life-saving material. It's got a 25-year use life, at which point they get decommissioned. They cannot be recycled. There's no traditional means of recycling them, so they get sent to landfill. And I thought, yeah, it's beautiful, I'll have it, I'll take it. And then I promptly went back to the British Library to try and understand, what is fire hose made of, who makes it, and what could it potentially be. So the goal was always, what's the next best possible second life for this material. And then we found out that the big luxury companies in France have been using fire hose, a fire hose like material, let's say nitrile rubber, since the dawn of complex polymers. And then I thought, well, let's do luxury. And I knew nothing about it. Zero interest in fashion. Still to this day, probably zero interest in fashion. I think I'm more interested in material flows and culture and what people eat, and biodiversity crisis and climate change. But the really interesting thing about luxury is that it's a great way to have a conversation. It's a great way to change people's perceptions about what a waste is. It's a great way to enter someone's life through their closet, and maybe be the belt that they keep on their jeans forever, and have that wonderful conversation. So that's the business that we started back in 2005. And I guess the third thing that we do that's quite unique, so we rescue, we transform. The third thing we do is that we donate 50% of our profits to charity. Because for me, in a circular economy, if we just cut and paste the linear economy into a new circular but yet capitalist paradigm, we're still failing. We need the circular flow of capital as well. So we give 50% of our profits to charity. In the case of the fire hose, it goes to the firefighters' charity. And that's something that's now, I mean, we're almost 20 years into our journey as a business. We rescue 15 different materials. We have charity partners for all of them. So,
wow, super inspiring. Out of curiosity, in your list of the materials you saw disposed, what were the other ones that may have made the cut?
I had a thing for ages for mattresses, and I still do. I have a bugbear about mattresses, duvets. So these are like the big quilts that that people sleep with all the time, and they're made so cheaply of synthetic materials that a lot of people don't bother to wash them because they don't fit in their home washing machines. People just get rid of them after several years and get a new one. Luckily, there's 6 or 7 amazing companies now that restuff old duvets and get them back out into the market. But duvets was another one. Closed cell waste foam. I could talk about this one.
Clearly. Wow, super exciting. Thank you for the origin story. And it's also so interesting to kind of note the date that you started, because I think like circular fashion and repurposing kind of saw it start more recently. Yeah. And so it'd be like a whole separate conversation to know, what did it look like in 2005, the circular fashion space. But thank you for that.
It was empty. Let's put it that way.
That was my assumption.
There was our grandmothers making quilts. There was Stephanie's grandfather.
And then that's it.
Otherwise, it was empty. So yeah.
That was my assumption. But yeah, super, super cool story. I'll turn it back over actually to you, Stephanie, to ask if you could explain how Queen of Raw helps rescue and repurpose raw materials in the fashion industry. So if you could give a raw breakdown of it.
Sure. It's great to hear, obviously, me here talking about what we can do out of things that traditionally end up discarded in a landfill or incinerated, and actually being able to identify what has once been thought of as waste and find a way to monetize it and minimize it, right? Then you're really empowering the circular economy. And one of the questions I saw in the Q&A box was around kind of market trends and what the workforce needs to be thinking about. Whether you want to go work in, startups and technology-based companies that are innovating in this space, or go work at a big company and figure out as an entrepreneur how to solve these problems from the inside out. I think what's really important when it comes to circular economy is not just talking about the circle, which is why we all do what we do for people, for planet, and empowering all of us, but also to talk about the economy. Don't forget that this is an economic principle that makes business sense. And that's really the point of view to your question specifically around how we work with big companies and solve this problem. We try to put the economy in circular economy, so it's a win-win-win for everyone. And how do you say no to that? So when we've gone after, some of the largest companies in the world, we work with the likes of Nike, Ralph Lauren, Shein, and beyond to help them be more sustainable at the end of the day in different ways. And when we work with these big companies, we help them first find all this excess inventory that's sitting deep within their supply chain. This is a multi-trillion-dollar a year problem and growing, which is scary because by some accounts it feels really big. Like, how do you tackle that big of a problem and that much waste around the world? But if you flip it on its head, it also means that fashion, textiles, supply chain, we literally have the power to solve things like the world's water crisis if we rethink how we do things. So we first help big companies find all this valuable excess inventory. Then we give them a platform, as you shared in the beginning, a marketplace to be able to reuse it, resell it, and if it can't be resold, recycle or donate it. And then we can measure and report the good work that they do, leveraging our software. And that's really important because not only do you want them doing the good work, you also want to be able to measure your progress, report it to the world, talk about the good things you're doing, and then figure out how do you minimize that waste going forward? Because that's the ultimate goal, right? We want to solve a problem. We want to solve the world's water crisis. So we want to rethink how we do things. And that's really what our software has been empowering around the world. We do work with everyone from the biggest companies that I mentioned to students, makers, crafters, quilters. Our platform facilitates as small as 1 yard of fabric and up to tens of millions of yards. So the idea is that everyone can participate, monetize, and minimize all this excess. And that's really how we've been thinking about things. Of course, it's fun to leverage technology like blockchain and machine learning to do that. But at the end of the day, we want this to make business sense. And I think it's really exciting to see in all the schools, everybody learning about this and how important it is and how to problem solve. But I just mentioned, don't forget the unit economics of it, so it makes business sense.
For sure. Thank you for that. I have a question for both of you about kind of the challenges that you may have encountered, either in your opinion about the overall circular fashion space or in your own stories, because I'm sure there are many. So whoever wants to go first.
I could jump in with a quick one and then turn it to Kresse. When we first started looking at this problem of textile fashions waste around the world, it was seen as, back in 2018, a nice to have, but not a have to have. We would go on the door, and our core team is based here in New York, although we are global now. And we would go to the fashion brands and retailers in the fashion district, and we'd knock on their doors and say, you've got a waste problem. It's costing you a lot of money. We can help you save and make money while doing good. Like, oh, that's nice. Here, go talk to the sustainability departments. And don't get me wrong, they are very important. That is your brand champion. Those are the groups who are going to help push everything that you're looking to do in the company. But at the time, at least, it was often a newly created position. They weren't really fully integrated into a business unless you were built like Kresse's from the ground up and had that spirit and ethos already built in. If you're a big company, it was new and they didn't have budgets and they didn't have directives yet. That's changed a lot now. But at the time, it was hard. We did find some early adopters. We didn't let the no's, and we got plenty of no's back then. We didn't let those no's stop us. We knew there was an opportunity here. And at the end of the day, we found some early adopters, and then obviously the world is where it is today, and this has become a top priority for every C-suite. But that a couple quick things in there. One is obviously don't let the no's dissuade you. If you know you have an opportunity, you keep pushing through and find the early adopters. But then also, sustainability isn't just about the sustainability team. This is about the CEOs like Kresse setting corporate objectives and agendas for the company. It's about the CFOs who are dealing with the books and records and the financials and this economic opportunity about waste and other streams. This is the CMOs who want to market and tell a good story to their end consumers like you who care about this. And this is the COOs and the CTOs who deal in the day-to-day operations about how the business should run well. And I'm excited about a future where we can stop talking about it as just sustainability and circular economy is just the way good business is done. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. But yeah, that was how my thoughts on that.
Appreciate that.
Oh, big challenges. I don't know, where do you start? Like fire hose, we had no idea how we could transform it into a textile. So that was kind of mission number one. We didn't know how we could clean it, other than by basically scrubbing it by hand. So trying to find a scalable way of cleaning fire hose resulted in us designing a piece of equipment that then no one would build. So Elvis had to build it. Learning to, finding manufacturing. We went to all these manufacturers that made luxury goods and they all rejected the material. They said, it's not luxury. We work with leather. That's not something that we're happy to work with. So then we made our own products and took them back to those factories and they're like, oh, okay, I can make a better bag than that. And it was, we had so many challenges along the way. And then just when we went out into the marketplace and said, this is made of fire hose, we first went to retailers and all the retailers said, this is crazy. And then we went direct to consumer and they loved it. So this is, Stephanie said it as well. You can't take no for an answer. Sometimes you just have to find a way around the no. And the no might be from one part of a company, or the no might be from a retailer, or the no might be from, any traditional distribution method, but there's always another way. And I think the most interesting thing for us now is that, we've gotten through those first few years as a business where you think anything is going to kill you. So the fascinating thing now is that the challenges that we have are ones that we really are choosing to tackle. And they're equally difficult and they're equally impossible because we've said, why can't we tackle climate change? Why can't we tackle biodiversity crisis? Why can't we tackle corporate greed? Why can't we tackle, I'm speaking at the Labour Party conference in the UK next weekend because I think they're going to be the next government in power and I'm lobbying for them to have a national waste policy. And why can't I be involved in that? I can. So I think the really interesting thing about being around for a while is that you then start to realize that yes, there are challenges, but there are also no rules.
Right.
Really, there aren't any. You can decide what the playing field looks like. You can decide which players you want to put out there. You can decide what the rules of the game are, and you can just play that way. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, really, is that you can kind of play outside the lines.
Definitely. I think the commonality in your stories is the challenge. The type of challenge saw a turning point once you found your listeners. And I think it's interesting that you both, had a moment of like, oh, these are our early adopters. These are the people willing to commit, even though initially it may have not seemed clear. And I'm sure alongside logistical challenges, like you mentioned, Kresse. But that turns me to a question from the chat. Zena asked, what departments I guess this is to you, Stephanie. What departments did the early adopters work in? If they were CEOs and COOs and C-suites, how did you reach them? And how did you convince them? That's a good question. How did you convince them?
No, it's a great question. The first two big companies that we worked with, we did come in through the chief sustainability officers. They were our champions internally, but what's important to note is they weren't the only people at the table. Once we talked to them about the opportunity, and we really positioned it as an economic opportunity for the business, something that would help drive their bottom and their top line and their brand equity and make them better, they were able to bring into the room the CFOs because they appreciated the unit economics, and the COOs and the CTOs because we were building a technology that had an operational efficiency to it that they needed their input on, and it helped them business do better. So, how do you get to those people? For us, the number one driver of organic B2B business traffic to date has been LinkedIn, to be honest. We haven't spent a penny yet in PR marketing or advertising. We use LinkedIn to share and talk about what we're doing. And even to this day, the number one piece of content that I ever shared was a little video that I shot on my phone in a WeWork office in 25 seconds, talking about this waste problem, posted it natively to LinkedIn, shared it with my network, and in hours, it just got 100,000 views and beyond. And this is with no paid marketing. And I mention that because I think what that speaks to is that people, especially in this industry, want real people, you and me, talking about what we're doing. This was not a paid influencer campaign, not that there aren't opportunities there and a time and place for that, but this was just us talking about the problem we saw, how we were solving it, and sharing that. So I think LinkedIn is a great way to reach a lot of C-suite in an organic, natural way, and also sharing video content, just of you talking about things and being the person behind it. It doesn't have to be professional either. That really speaks volumes, and that's been a great way to convince people. Once you get those early adopters, the final thing I'll mention is get those case studies. You find the one or two people who really believe in what you're doing, get some testimonials, get some case studies. Now that we've been able to share those publicly, that really helps amplify the impact. And in that case study, don't just talk about the environmental impact, talk about the economic impact of what we do. That's just little tidbits on my thoughts.
For sure. Yeah, it seems like a recurring theme is having the financial buy-in, because that's the first thing people can be convinced by if they're not value driven, especially at a company. So I think that emphasis makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I also wanted to kind of take a look at your design and creative strategy, Kresse. You mentioned that, one of the earlier challenges alone was cleaning it. So kind of even the steps required to deconstruct and turn it into a pattern for a functional bag. There's so many layers to that. So I kind of would love to know your early thinking for the first piece or the first prototype to now where you have multiple products. What was that creative process like?
Well, first I want to say that Stephanie can't undersell this, because I saw that first video of hers and it was amazing. And I know why it went viral. And it was because she was honest and straightforward, but it was the clarity of it. She knew the problem, she had a solution, and it was extremely clear, which is why I think it went viral. But yeah, our design process, again, we broke the rules. I remember going into, because again, I didn't know anything about fashion. I remember going into some of the big department stores in London, Harrods, Harvey Nichols, Selfridges, Liberty, and everything was about the season. Everything was about what was trendy or what was hot right now. And at the time, I think it was something called the boho bag. And I couldn't stand it, because from the time I was 18 years old or even younger, probably, well, I'm from Calgary, I'm from rural Alberta. I've only really ever worn bootcut jeans. I don't care about the skinny thing or the high-waisted thing or any of the other things. I do not like jeans with elastane in them. I like old-fashioned jeans that are bootcut and fit my cowboy boots underneath, because I have the same pair of cowboy boots I've had since I was 13 years old, right? And that's my approach to fashion. So when I went into these stores and they were all showing me the collection, I started to get really frustrated. So I thought, well, what are we going to do? We don't want to do that. And then we started asking different questions. I said, well, what do people buy every year? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, what are your perennials? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, okay, well, you've got flowers that grow for one season, but what are the things that keep coming up year after year after year? And then they were saying, well, it's a wash bag, a man's wallet, a messenger bag, a tote bag, like a bucket tote. And we came up with this list of 11 pieces. And doing those pieces well in Firehose was enough to differentiate us from the market, because Firehose is so distinctive and behaves in its own way. So we have only ever reinterpreted the classics. We don't do seasons. We don't do any of that. And that was another rule that we broke, because then the department stores wouldn't stock our goods, because we wouldn't provide a new set of goods every 4 months. But the seasons is why, you know, it to a certain extent is why we need Stephanie, because you've got companies that are like, oh, it's turquoise. And then 3 months later, no, it's khaki. And then 3 months later, they want another color or another texture. And that's why we have all of this waste, is because there used to be 4 seasons a year. Now there's companies that are producing a new seasonal collection or a capsule collection every hour or so in the case of Shein, right? And we don't have enough people to warrant that amount of churn. So I think that was for us the approach, and it still is the approach. We only make interpretations of classic pieces. We only do utilitarian things, and we will only ever release a new item if we get 200 requests. One idea of that is we have a bag called the Dutch tote. We have a lot of fans in Holland, and up until the point we made the Dutch tote, all of our bags were kind of landscape rather than portrait, right? And the Dutch ladies were all saying, we want a portrait bag that you can drop a laptop into and 3 bottles of wine. And we literally had that request more than 200 times. And we thought, okay, we are making the Dutch tote now. And it is one of our best selling bags.
Wow.
But that's how our approach to design. We don't do blue sky. Oh, what's hot right now? We don't do that at all.
And Kresse, you're an incredible example of how to do it from the beginning. And I truly believe that when a lot of people first heard about sustainability and circular economy, they immediately assumed that it was going to be something not fashionable, or that it automatically was going to cost a lot more money. And I think what's exciting, what you've demonstrated, and I've seen your collaborations and partnerships with some of the best luxury brands in the world, as well as your own brand. And it's just been incredible, the work you do in demonstrating that this is possible. Every company can be built that way from the ground up going forward. But I do appreciate what you said too, which is there are companies who are not built like that, especially the larger, older legacy companies. And I think there was a question that I saw in the chat that was intriguing and probably controversial around fast fashion. And how do we promote kind of minimalism and phase it out in the future? And I want to say, and this probably will be a bit controversial here, but it's just my opinion and my thoughts, and I welcome other thoughts as well on this. I find it really hard in this sustainability, circular economy business when people automatically want to exclude other people from the circle. And when they call out certain companies who do exist because there's a demand right now for their products, for better or worse, and you say, okay, let's exclude them. We're not going to solve anything for them. Let's just try to phase them out. And when you do that, you're ignoring a huge part of the solution. Changing a % of the way these big companies and faster run companies work can have a massive environmental and economic impact that unlocks value and opportunities and good practices for all. So from my company's position, and others may disagree, we took the position that we want to work with everyone. We want to empower everyone from fast fashion to luxury across industries and around the world to be able to participate in circular economy and minimize waste going forward. And for us, as long as we can measure that there is a commitment being made and economic and environmental progress that we can report, we're really proud to do that. That's something we stand behind. Others may not agree with it, but I think we have to meet the end consumers where they are today. And if they are demanding a certain product and it happens to be at a certain price point that may be fast fashion, well, how can we do that in a way that is also environmental? And that's part of the work we do with some of our fast fashion clients. So we can dive deeper into it, but I just want to highlight it because it's an interesting conversation. There may be ultimate goals about the type of businesses that are built like Kresse's in the future. But while there are other ones out there, how can everyone participate and democratize access to these resources and sustainable opportunities?
It's a crucial point. We cannot exclude any company from a discussion about how they can improve, ever. I find it very, we've gotten into this a bit of a bad habit where people can be very binary and say, and try and get in this where we're not going to platform that company. And actually, that's a big mistake. Every company can be a part of the solution, provided that you welcome them in. And it is really important to call out things that are happening that are wrong, but never, like, just a blanket exclusion doesn't work for me either, because I don't think that helps anybody to progress in the long term.
No. And imagine if some people out there right now looking for careers went and worked with this kind of a mindset at these biggest companies. It's not for everyone, but if you did and you were able to go and demonstrate to them, even if they don't have a job position open in sustainability, that's the best case to reach out to those companies, because you're not competing against anyone but yourself when you send that resume and tell them how you can make them more environmentally and economically viable, successful, and efficient. And I don't think there's a company in the world that wouldn't say they want to do that, especially today. If any good can come out of the world right now with a pandemic and recession, it's that it has unlocked what is broken in the system. It has demonstrated what we as people care about and the kind of future we want. Now it's about going and getting there. So I think it's the greatest time to be in the market, to demonstrate to companies or start your own in this space and show with what's broken how you can solve it, because everyone knows now more than ever that they have to.
Sure. I think you both said something really interesting about there is clearly a demand for lower priced, lower quality items that we can't completely dissuade. So we can't cause a paradigm shift of everybody that's expecting the trendiest item at the footsteps of their door in 2 days. You can't just do that, but you can work with the people that are channeling that for them to do better. So I think that's a really interesting opinion. And I think also reflective of what you just said, Stephanie, of if they don't have a chief sustainability officer, if they don't have a sustainability team, that's an opportunity for you to come in and kind of thinking about opportunities. I have a question in the chat of if you think having a chemical engineering background could help in sort of figuring out how scientifically the process works, then implement it as an entrepreneur. So I think, like, more broadly, the role of chemical engineering as an added value in the space of circular fashion when it comes to textiles and sustainable related companies.
Every single skill set has a part to play. But if you are a chemical engineer and you're reading this, just look at what Leeds University has just announced. They found a way to take dyes from existing textiles off of those textiles, recycle the textile, and then put the old dye onto new textiles. And that's chemical engineering at its absolute finest. I always knew we'd be able to repurpose, cottons and cellulosic fibers and nylons and rPETs, but dye, I mean, there is a lot that pretty much anybody with any skill set can contribute to change in this space.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a unique background and a powerful background as we start to innovate these new processes, new recycling techniques, and even new fibers and materials going forward, whether they're man-made or beyond, that can build for that better future. But on the flip side, I also want to say, if you don't have a background in chemical engineering or engineering at all, or technology or anything, don't be afraid to enter this space either. I did not have a technology background. As Rayouf said in our intro, I was a Wall Street attorney, although I did come from a family in fashion and textiles. I definitely did not have a background in technology, but you can find the right partners and collaborators to learn about this space and problem solve, even without that kind of a formal education or formal background in that area. For me, when we first started Queen of Raw, I had this idea, I saw the problem, but I knew the solution had to be technology-based. And so the first thing I did was I went to General Assembly in New York, which for those of you who may not know, it's a great technology hub. I knew that's where some innovative technology people would be, and just started talking to people and reading job descriptions on the board. And something about this one job description just resonated with me. And I met that man at Starbucks. We had coffee. We mapped out on a napkin what the solution would look like. And he is my co-founder, and we've been working together ever since. So also, you never know where you can find these great opportunities, and just building the right partnerships to drive the result and the solution. I'm proud now to have learned a lot more about technology, but you can go do it. Yep.
I appreciate that. I think, as well as a student for myself, I think I've gotten so many opportunities that I on paper may have not been qualified for just by messaging on LinkedIn or messaging on Instagram. If they may have a following, it gets you so far, and it like almost validates like, hey, listen to me. I have like, just give me a chat, 20 minutes of your time. Maybe there's no ask. Maybe I don't want an internship or I don't want a job. I just want to chat with you. And that's costed me so many opportunities that I'm lucky to have. So that's another thing, is shooting your shot out there.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people, you don't realize that you're an expert in this space, even by being here, listening to on a localized platform, educating yourself on this. You are becoming or are an expert in this space more than others out there. And a lot of people also ask, how do you get started sharing that expertise and commanding that space and being an expert? One of the first things I did, and it worked really well, and it's free and easy to do, was I wrote myself a press sheet. And you must be asking, like, how do you write a press sheet if you have no press? So I imagined, with everything going on in the world, what were 4 or 5 little stories, little sound bites that the press could call on me that I could talk about. And of course, it had to do with this company I was building and the problem I was solving, but I didn't mention it exactly. It had a 1-sentence sexy headline and a few sentences of what the article or the topic would be about. And I wrote it on a sheet and I just attached it to every email I sent, whether it was a customer, a partner, press. And it started getting circulated around, and press want to call on people, especially when you have multiple topics you can talk to. So they started reaching out a little bit. And then, of course, I started adding articles. So we started adding the logos to the press sheet. And for anyone who has seen my signature now in my emails, I still stick every link and key, and it is a thick signature to every email that go out. And some people might think it's overkill, but for me to be able to share and demonstrate that, it has been so helpful. And like I said, we haven't spent a penny yet in PR marketing or advertising. So it's a great way to get going, build that expertise, and keep updating that press sheet and that big signature in your email. You got it.
That's such a great call out. Just the fact that you might be a subject matter expert yourself, but you just don't know it. And how can you leverage that in your conversations? So appreciate that. We have a question from the audience, kind of thinking about fashion trends going forward with the idea of minimalism in mind. Brittany asks, do you see fashion going towards only a few capsule pieces, like in historical times, and just different overcoats? So I think this is definitely more of a trend cycle question, but I don't know if any of you have thoughts.
I think there's a lot of ways to answer that. One of the best exhibitions I ever went to was about 2 Russian artists that during the communist revolution in Russia in the early part of the 1900s, like let's say 1920s, 1930s, they were tasked with coming up with very simple textile designs that could be worn in incredibly utilitarian ways by everyone and repurposed. And they came up with some really innovative shapes that could be fashioned by people in a lot of different ways. And I was inspired by that because I thought, they've put their art and they've channeled their creativity into a really practical problem, but also to deal with politics and to deal with culture and to deal with people at the time. And then you see biodiversity loss and climate change, and you think we might all have a future for clothing, but we might not have a future for fashion, because we simply won't be able to afford it. We will run out of water. The vast majority of clothing is made from fossil fuel derived materials. We will not have those materials. So what are we going to do? Now, you could look at it in that reductive way, but I think really we're about to unlock the biosynthetic revolution, where we're already seeing some unbelievably interesting fibers that are, yes, man-made, but they're made on a biodegradable or compostable or natural scaffolding. And they can be biodegraded, composted, and remade perpetually. This really is the future for fashion. And it's an exciting time because we don't know what a lot of those textiles are going to look like, feel like, how they're going to perform. But I just think back to those early days of really early nylon, really early Fortrell suits and polyester outfits that were horribly sweaty and really uncomfortable. And we're going to have that kind of period like we have it now. There's a lot of these leather alternatives that are, half cactus, half polyurethane, and really a Frankenfiber, and don't really deliver on any fronts. That's the space we're in now. But even the cactus company is already coming up with a pure cactus. And we're just in that flux of innovation. And I think we're about to see something really exciting. I don't think people, given the way we express ourselves, are ever really going to be happy with one item of clothing and one jacket. Even everyone says French women have these minimalist wardrobes. Well, not true. They're just very good at bringing new things in and recycling them and sharing them and vintaging them, and
I agree with you. I mean, unless we're all going to go naked, which maybe we will in the future, but in some form for now, we are going to be wearing clothes as humans. It's just what we wear, how we wear it, what it's made of, who it comes from, who it goes to, what you do with it at end of life. That's all what's innovating and changing. So maybe some people's consumption will change, maybe not. But the longer we can keep these materials in circulation, the more unit economics value and opportunity we can derive out of it to still drive down the environmental impact of all of that going around. So lots of opportunities. Maybe for that person who asked that question, your problem will be to solve build a company that just builds those few pieces. It's all a person needs in their wardrobe. Great idea. There was one other quick thing, an anonymous question, but I found it.
I'm glad you talked.
Go right ahead. You got it then.
Thank you. I was just going to say, reflecting kind of on the moral question, I think this is a very tough space to almost exist in because there's so many push and pulls of value decisions you have to make. So an anonymous question did ask, how do you balance your moral conduct with the search for a middle ground with corporate, so you find work opportunities? Something I always think about. So I'd love your opinion.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's something we think about all the time too, because obviously we built our company and wanting to respect and help for people and for planet. So that's a very important question. There are companies out there who only work on the planet side of things. There are companies out there who only work on the people side of things. There are companies out there who work on both. We are all trying to solve these problems. But at the end of the day, they are very much interrelated. So I value and respect that question. The way we think about it, the beauty with our solution is by demonstrating to these big companies how much money they've saved and made while also being environmentally conscious, they can take that money and put it that they've saved and made and put it back into doing better work in their supply chain. At that point, they can then pay their workers more. They can adopt more of these innovative, sustainable materials that we're talking about. They can use more sustainable technologies in order to be a more efficient business. And they can do it without their CapEx expenditures going up. And so what we have seen with the companies that we work with is in our partnership, they actually pledge a portion of the money that is saved and or made back to their workforce. And I think that's just a powerful demonstrating. It's definitely, we don't purport to solve all the problems for everyone. I wish we could, but that can show how and where the money goes to and the savings and to improve their overall supply chain. So just one way in which, but there are a lot of incredible companies also doing other great work in that space so we can all drive everyone forward.
I think also we do have to accept that there are companies who are where they are. And of course, I want them all to change. And my way of making them change is to just show what can be done. So we are a living wage employer. We make all of our own products. Even if you have come to us at the age of 16 as an intern, you will be paid a London living wage. Okay. And everyone gets paid more from there. I would be uncomfortable selling a product that was made by someone who wasn't paid, who was in bonded labor, where modern slavery was an issue. I would simply find that unacceptable behavior. And I wish all people felt like that. We have legislation in the UK on modern slavery, but we don't enforce it. We have legislation in the EU on modern slavery, and they're starting to enforce it. And this is what I think is particularly interesting. I don't think it can be left to the consumer, because right now the consumer actually has a tough life. A lot of people who buy cheap clothes don't have a lot of money. They're underpaid themselves. And they are busy and they have a lot of things to think about, and they don't have the privilege of being able to question the integrity of every single grain of rice that comes into their household. But when governments change the legislation and start bringing things in like extended producer responsibility, which would be awesome, because Stephanie would get paid a lot more money to provide the service.
Well, you're
that
doing
she
an
provides.
amazing job in Europe, leading the way for us in the US. And we're working, we do work with New York City government and the White House and US Department of
Yes.
State. But yeah.
New York City is doing a lot, but I think legislation is going to be what unlocks this. Because if we at the moment in the UK actually enforced modern slavery laws, there would be goods coming from fast fashion companies and luxury companies, because some of them use the same factories. And those goods would be seized at the border as if they were cocaine or heroin. That is what has to happen in order for some of the companies to be supercharged to change their practices. Because in reality, what we need at the end of the day is a totally level playing field where we respect everyone, and where somebody who's underpaid in this country, like the UK or America, doesn't wear clothing that is at the expense of someone who's underpaid in another country. Nobody really wants that. It's just that we live in an unfair system where those things aren't recognized. And we will get there if these are the things that we decide to fight for. And certainly I fight for it by showing there's another way. I remember the first time I ever met the CEO of Chanel, and he said, "What you're doing is impossible. It's not real." And I said, look, it's very real. I'm going to email you the last 3 years of my P&L so that you can see just how much tax I paid and just how very real it is.
That's awesome.
And that's how you create change. Sometimes campaigning works, but also sometimes just sitting on your high horse showing a very good example works too.
And you make actually a great point, though, and I agree. Huge opportunities with the regulatory regime, and there's a lot going on around the world in this space that we are aware of. It's where being a lawyer has helped seeing it, so I agree with you. Regulation definitely has a part to play. But if you think about who else and where else these opportunities for you in a career path may lie, one thing I thought was really interesting that we did with New York City government is we had government at the table, and we formed the New York Circular City Initiative. But it wasn't just government. We also partnered with H&M, Unilever, Cisco, Goldman Sachs, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So it was a combination of for-profits, non-for-profits, startups, big companies, government, everybody at the table. And we wrote a white paper, which is publicly available on circularnyc.org. And it showed how many good jobs could be created and how much money could be saved and made by New York City going circular in the coming years. And so it wasn't just about slapping businesses with millions of dollars in liability on the books. It was about showing what the city could do, how many jobs that were good could be created, how much money could be saved and made, and what solutions like ours can actually solve the problem and help businesses offset that coming legal liability. So I think thinking about it in that way and collaborating, not just with regulatory, but others at the table is really powerful because it just shows all the different opportunities and how the circle is connected and how we can solve this together.
For sure. Thank you both so much. That was so insightful. I'm mentally jotting down so many notes to come back to, but I think the heart of what we're saying is private and public need to collaborate heavily for change to be happen, and the shift in perception as well from public governments needs to equate what a lot of startups and private companies are thinking of that are doing the work that you're doing. Yes, go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, and you know, one thing I also was going to mention, this is a fascinating space to be working in, but as you hear us talk about it, and even just begin in an hour to unpack this, there is a lot there. And I do think sometimes in the sustainability circular economy conversation, we care so much about what we're doing, and we talk a lot about the facts and the statistics. And just two quick things to encourage people as they look at a career path in this. What's been really helpful for us is not just to get too bogged down in the scary statistics, but always to try to be positive in communication and talk about how we can actually solve that statistic and that problem. Because otherwise, I feel like companies, individuals, we get stuck in the mud, we get stuck in the ground. We don't know where to go or what to do on day one. And so I do want to encourage everyone to try to keep it positive, look at collaborative solutions, and think about when you talk about something scary, how to solve it. And the other thing that was really helpful is early on in our career, this is complicated stuff, right? What Kresse's doing, what we're doing, there's heavy technology and innovation going on here. But when you're communicating it to the world at large, The hardest thing, but the best thing we ever did in our business was get our pitch under 60 seconds. So like you've got your pitch of what you do that's like half an hour to 20 minutes, for investors. You've got your 10-minute pitch. You've even got your 4-minute pitch. But having a 60-second or under pitch that gets everything in, that has been the number one best thing we ever did as a business. And it's a pitch, to be honest, I still use today. My children know it. They care about it. They can say it and understand it. And that has really helped me know in what I'm communicating that at a certain time, place, it resonates. People understand if my kids can get it, anyone can get it, and then we can go change the world.
I think
the
yeah,
key
in the
thing
age
Stephanie
of-
said there for me is, and this is really, think about this in your career, is how can you foster collaboration? So nobody can achieve a circular economy on their own. It involves, academia, government, business, citizens, everyone. And the people who are going to be really crucial are the ones who can connect the dots and bring those people together and make change happen. Because we cannot do any of this on our own. Certainly we can't do any of this on our own at scale. And that means you have to be able to communicate extremely clearly, and you have to be able to bring people to the table, and you have to motivate them to work together. So the other thing I would say, skill I suggest you develop is communication, motivation, empathy, because that's often how you can hit people on a personal level, but also just realizing that you don't have to do all of it by yourself. You just have to be a part of the solution. You just have to help bring people to the table. It's not all your responsibility. It's not all on one set of shoulders.
Yeah, 100%.
And I did just see a quick final comment in the chat about the role of influencers, which I touched on briefly, but not really much. Someone saying have a role to play. Absolutely, we all do. But here's one quick interesting fact. We, in partnership with one of the big companies we work with, they did a collaboration with a huge influencer. And it was good. It worked, and it helped to drive and explain the narrative of what they were doing with us and with this influencer. But the work they did directly with us and the communications they had directly with us did 148 times more impressions than with the celebrity influencer. It was interesting. I'm not saying that statistic will always happen. And I agree, influencers have a big part to play. But don't forget the part that you have to play, and that can speak volumes too, and that you can reach that level as well, of course.
For sure. I think this space is really interesting because just thinking about social media as a driver for extreme consumption, and everything is shared online, the role influencers play, and the newest, hottest stuff constantly on display is really interesting as well. We have a few minutes, so I want to leave my last question kind of thinking about our audience. There's around 60 people in the room, probably really interested in entering this space. I'd love to know if you guys have any insights about early career in circular fashion. How has that dynamic looked like? Is it a lot of, you hustle it and you DM the founder and you find an opportunity yourself? Do you think it's become more of an established industry where there are postings online? Anything you can offer in the space as advice for people hoping to enter the space, from a practical standpoint?
Well, certainly from a team perspective, 3 of the people, or even 4 of the people who've joined us recently are people who reached out to me on LinkedIn almost years ago. Some of them when they were at university, and they have kept in touch. They have continued to update me. They've continued to show an interest in what we do. And as soon as we had an opening that was relevant, I went straight to those people because they've been engaged for ages. So definitely get in touch with people. There's nothing to stop you from doing that. But the best advice I was ever given, and I think this is really powerful, is that you have to chase what you're curious about. Like, what are you really interested in? And the things that you're interested in, if you show up anywhere with that true curiosity and genuine spirit of, I want to know what's going on here, I want to help, I want to be a part of it, it's very intoxicating, and it's very difficult for people to say no to you. It's a really good way into almost any organization.
You're 100% right. You can feel it. You can see it. Definitely. I mean, feel free to reach out to all of us on LinkedIn. We regularly post, but not just for our company, internships and job openings, but also within our network. There are definitely job boards that we can circulate and share. And there are great groups around sustainability, circularity, both locally, nationally, and internationally that you can join for free and listen and participate in. And what's funny is, as big as the world seems sometimes, and as huge as a problem as it seems, you do start to see the same people, which also shows how connected we are. And Kresse and I know each other from before this, obviously from a long time ago, before coming together on this. You just start to learn and know the people in the community. And the good news is, you're right, it's only growing. And the time is now, the opportunity is now. The one piece of advice someone gave me that I think is also really powerful, I don't always take it, but I should: ask everyone you know and everyone you don't know for help and an opportunity. So don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to put an idea out there. That's how you're going to learn. The worst thing someone does is ignore it or say no. And the best thing is it turns into something. So, and I can't tell you how many no's have now turned into yeses. So keep going at it. You got it.
Appreciate it. I appreciate both of you for such a great conversation. Like I said, I feel so nourished in terms of how much we've exchanged, and can't wait to look back at this. I think this is a nice way to wrap it up and, say thank you for everybody that also joins, and turn it over to Selma.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you so much again, Stephanie, Kresse, and Rayouf. This was a really interesting conversation. Everything from being a part of the solution, being a part of the change, not taking no for an answer, doing what people say is impossible, even when the Chanels of the world are telling you no. I think this has been beyond circular fashion, really an inspiration for people to keep going and persevering and having grit through whatever it is you want to do, which is really what today's about, right? Is fighting and making change in places that seem a little bit impossible. So we want to thank you for being here, everyone. We do have some amazing sessions lined up. Our next session is with the CEO of Aspire Food Group, who's going to be talking about pioneering the journey of cricket farming in sustainable agriculture. It's going to be a super interesting event. So feel free to join us. That event is starting in just 1 minute. And I just want to thank our speakers because their time is very valuable, and they chose to be here with you to answer questions, to share their insight, because they want you to be the change. So thank you again for being here and for your time. Thank you, Rayouf, for being a wonderful, wonderful moderator. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Localize and Rayouf. Kresse.
Take care. Bye.